Hello and welcome. This is the Women Writers Festival, the world's largest festival that travels around both India and overseas, talking about women's writing and celebrating different genres of how women are taking to the written or the spoken word. Storytelling is literally seeing a complete transformation as we put a gendered lens to it and also tell stories through the eyes and ears and words of women. There's a fantastic book out in the market. If you haven't yet picked it up, do pick it up. Regrets None by Dolly Thakore. When you talk to her, you know why her book can't be titled anything but Regrets None. Dolly Thakore, thanks very much. Congratulations on your book. For the sake of our viewers who are possibly still figuring out the entire expanse of the works of Dolly Thakore, she is one of India's top newscasters at a time when television was so new. She was roped in for casting of the iconic film Gandhi. She's a very familiar face in the theater circuit. More recently, relatively recently, a very central character in the Vagina Monologues. And not just that, she's unstoppable, which is why on the 5th of September, she's also launching another theater performance, and she'll talk about all of that and her book with us. Dolly, welcome to the Women Writers Fest.
It's lovely to be here. I haven't been part of She the People for a while, but I am She the People.
I am delighted to hear that. So let's talk about Regrets None. You just told me when we were getting up, getting ready in the green room, that Shelley, I've had not a moment of boredom in this pandemic. What keeps Dolly Thakore going?
Well, I can't believe that people have nothing to do. I'm on so many committees. I'm on so many screening committees, whether it's for plays or it's for films or it's for OTT or for, all right, let me just start. As soon as the lockdown was announced, I was a judge and a moderator and a compere for Dignity Foundation, which is, as you know, for senior citizens. I had to view all on Zoom, mind you, which was a totally new medium for me. And I had to view 251 women from all over India, from Cochin, Kanyakumari to Kashmir almost. And they were modeling their own clothes. There were no Tarun Taheliani models or anything, but they modeled, and I had to speak to them. The organization Dignity Foundation had shortlisted a few of them for me, and it was men and women. Some of them were retired judges, some of them were retired generals, and it was wonderful doing that and talking to them. Right. So that was the first big thing that I did after the pandemic. How can I then say that I'm bored? I have so many interesting things happening. Soon after that, the Chhatrapati Museum in Mumbai was doing a whole series, and they invited me to interview Gerson on his life and his theatre. Now, Gerson is, in any case, a great figure. Gerson Dukuna, for those of you that don't know, he's the best advertising man we've had. He's the best theatre actor and a voice to die for. And I interviewed him. So these kind of assignments kept coming my way all the time.
So let's bring you back to you. You wrote the book over the last few years. How was that journey?
I started that book in 1982. So I wrote it for a few days. I've still got the handwritten notes in a little booklet that I've got, when I started in 1982. Then I stopped. Then I started again in 10 years later. Then I stopped and I started 10 years later again, because I've just done so much and I thought some of it needed to be shared. And I saw how women were getting evolved. Look at the young women today. My God, I'm in such awe of them, and I wish I could be young again to do some of the things and take up some of the challenges that they have. But
like what?
Well, look at engineers, the pilots, the generals in the army. I mean, they're women. When I was growing up, you were either a nurse or a teacher or something like that. I got into communications, and I must say I interviewed a lot of these people. And if you read my book, there are great, for me, great things that I have done. I met all the politicians. I have interviewed all of them. I've had very interesting. I have had a very interesting life. I haven't had a day's boredom.
How has your definition as a feminist transformed since the time you first encountered it? And like you said,
Shaili, let me say, okay, few things I need to make clear. I do not come from a family which has wealth and property and farms and aeroplanes or airlines or anything like that. I come from a very modest working class family. My father was in the Air Force. Now, being in the defense services gave me the acceptance that everybody was equal. There was no discrimination between language, color, caste, food, religion, faith, which has unfortunately overtaken our lives today. So one had a terrific, happy childhood. One was you never had these discriminations. You celebrated every festival with everyone. So that was another opening of one's mind. Um, so and then okay, I was brought up in Jesuit schools, convent schools, where there was a terrific discipline. Now that doesn't mean we were not told you go to church, you sit here, you pray or confess or do anything like that, but there was a terrific approach to life. Of course you were disciplined, but you were terrifically open to everything that was happening around you.
yeah. So that's
And
one
right
more thing. Yeah.
and
Sorry.
right from the age of 5, I'd begun to take part in plays, in theatre, in debates. There were inter-class, inter-house, inter-school, inter-college, inter-university. I went to take part in inter-university, all India university youth festivals in Delhi. Um, I mean, I've had a terrific opportunity to be able to do that. I've never stretched my hand for anything. I've never asked anyone for anything. It's just come to me. And I suppose there's a kind of confidence that you exude, the kind of things that you've done that people hear about, read about. I was on stage when I was 5 years old. Now, if you read my book, you'll find all of this in the book because I have poured my heart out honestly, openly. There are no holds barred at all. Uh, uh, so when I was 5, I was on stage, or when I was 6, I was on stage. My sari opened out. I was playing Krishna, and the sari opened out. The curtain came down. The ladies rushed to tidy me up because this was for I think Republic. No, those days there was no Republic.
Or Janmashtami, I
Oh,
guess.
no, it was for one of the Independence Days or Air Force Day or whatever. And the women came. It was for the defense services. It was for the done by the officers' wives of that club. And so
Okay.
they rushed in to tidy me up. And then the curtain opened. And when the curtain opened, a huge applause went up from everybody. And I was hooked. I loved the applause, and I've loved the applause ever since.
Sure. So there we do have one thing in common. We're both Air Force girls
Oh,
in that
lovely.
sense. Yeah. So I hear you when you say that, everything was equal. There was so much intercultural and so on. In that sense, we often don't sometimes see that because I feel that's a privilege for all of us as well to grow up in such a inclusive space. But today, as you wrote your book, did you really have a sense of could things today be different? Could we have less repressive voices? Could we have more equality? Could we have
My
less?
darling, I have been interested in life right through. Even when I was a little girl, I was aware of the changes that were taking place in society. I was aware. Look, also, your biological urges are changing. You're growing up. My grandma, the other thing that I did want to say was that I come from a family where the women have worked, the men have worked, but the women are the ones who made all the decisions. The women were very hardworking. My grandmother was a nurse. My aunt was a nurse. My mother trained as a nurse. The only educated in terms of university was my aunt, who is still here with me, who's 97 years old. And in fact, she has been my role model, if at all, because I was a great one aspiring to be university and educated and things like that. Whereas all the others were, you know, metric pass in case there was metric in those days. So,
Yeah.
but they were all very qualified. They worked very hard.
You
Um,
talk about inspiration at home. I recognize in your book you've talked at length about motherhood. Maybe you want to spend some time telling us about how that idea has sort of evolved, the idea of motherhood. Because today we're having very sort of, I would say, fierce conversations on why this is not such an important identification mark for women.
no, I wanted to be a complete woman. I'd been married, I'd been divorced, I'd had relationships, and but I wanted to be a complete woman, to be pregnant, to bear a child, and know what being a complete woman is. So I went ahead. That decision was entirely mine, um, and I am so proud to say that the child I produced is also respected and revered and doing great things.
Yeah, surely. I mean, today I think the idea for complete woman has changed in that sense, and giving birth is not so important to it, or being a mother has not been sort of so integral to it. But that said, you are very honest in your memoir, and you talk about how times were shifting around you. You talk about sex, intimacy, love. These things were considered taboo to talk about, except for in some corners of society, particularly in glamour, I guess. Tell us a little bit about what you've dwelled upon in that space or in your book.
It's so unimportant. It was all part of growing up. Nobody discriminated against me. What I did was accepted by everybody. Uh, I used to get bouquets of flowers from the governor's wife. I've traveled with Indira Gandhi, and when Indira Gandhi is asking me who makes your cholis, it was like talking to my favorite aunt. I mean, so I've never had any poems about what I've done or been embarrassed or
Yeah.
ashamed or
But
anything.
why do you
I've
think
lived
that's
my
been the case?
life to the full, and my advice to everyone is that you also go ahead and do it, and it's amazing the kind of respect you earn when you do it. It was very easy for me too, when things didn't go right and when things were not going your way, to take to drink or drugs or whatever. But I never did any. I never resorted to any of that. I worked. I did the jobs that came my way. I've never applied for a job. I've done international film festivals. I've done you know, if you read the book, that I was there for the launch of the Apple satellite. It was the first ISRO satellite that went up. I've been on the Sagar Samrat, which was the first oil rig in India. I mean,
Yeah.
when you had experiences like that, how can you be um, little things like who will say what and what will people say affect you?
But they become the big things for many women, right? They may not have been so for you.
But that is
How
why
do
I've
we,
written the book. That is why
yes,
I've
that's what
written
I
the
was going
book,
to say.
because
That
I
how does
want
a young
them to
woman
read.
take away from that?
Well, listen, if a young woman agreed, economics plays a very big part in
Yeah.
our homes, in our families, because the father is a businessman and he controls everything. So you're not allowed to marry anybody outside your religion or caste or faith or whatever. And you have to marry somebody who's your equal. None of those things were important to me. And I would want women to learn that none of those things matter. Educate yourself, make your decisions. I don't disrespect anybody. I didn't leave home and run away with anybody, and people accepted it. So I
And
don't see
earn your
why
own money.
the woman has to have courage in herself, and there are lots of women who've had and done that.
How much
Right
of this?
from when you think of Lakshmi Bai, Lakshmi Sehgal, who was with Subhash Chandra Bose,
Yes, Captain.
to and that's again another generation and different people. But there are people who've done things like that.
Yeah. But how important was it for you to be financially independent? And would you say that became the genesis of this? I don't care
Look,
about what
the
anybody says.
thing is, no, as soon as you earn your own money and you know that you're not dependent on somebody else to pay your bills or whatever, um, you make your own choices and you take your own decisions. I have never depended on anybody for money. All right. I also, when I was young, thought that, oh, marriage, now everything is easy. I'll just live and live. But it didn't work out like that. And
Yeah.
it was first imposed upon me, but I then insisted, and all the sort of certainly 45 years of relationship with people, or 50 years of relationship with people, I have insisted that I pay my own and they pay their own.
Yeah.
So I've
Yeah.
shared
Yeah.
everything.
So in the period that you grew up, I would guess majority of your life, Dolly, a marriage has been considered not a milestone. It's been considered a goal for most people. Was it sometimes difficult to be in your peer group where somebody would say, "Hey, listen, you're
No, no,
different.
let me
This
tell
is the
you
way to
when
do it."
I, no, let me tell you when I was in just about finishing college, or we'd finished college. We used to also go through all the directories to see who was eligible in the foreign service or the IAS, because that was a group that I was moving around in. And all of us, because we were all at that time 19, 20, 21, dying to get married. And I think that is one of the reasons. But we also were brought up to say you had to be a virgin if you got married. So you had no boyfriends. You had crushes. Everybody has crushes. I mean, it's a biological thing that you look at, just like you have a crush on, say, a Dilip Kumar or a Devanand or something. And so you had crushes, but you never went out with them, because that's the kind of conservative Delhi society that I was brought up in, or the North Indian society that I was brought up in. But eventually, you had to take your own decisions, and that is why I think I also got married when I did, and then realized how different our fortunately Dilip, who was the person I married, and the only person that I married, was terrific, because he believed in what I believed. That we had very liberal views. We had an open marriage contract. It was the fact that we didn't get on completely is because we were the same age. We were both perhaps he was brought up to believe that uh, uh, he could do what he wanted, and I was brought up to believe that, in fact, even that is not quite correct. Um, if it didn't work out, because uh, I was already working. I was already on the cover of various magazines in Bombay. We were in London together. So when we came back in London was fine, because I was working for the BBC. He was at the Lincoln's Inn. We couldn't, and everything was easy. It's only when we came to India and the pressures began to come, uh, that one felt the difference. That in London, I was the only Indian girl, or one of the Indian girls that he'd met, and uh, I was quite somebody to reckon with. When I came to India, there were any number of beautiful Indian girls. So he was, and definitely opened up to all these young college girls who were now beginning to look at people and go
Yeah.
out, especially Bombay society, which was different from a society anywhere else. So, all those kind of pressures or experiences change you. You
Yeah.
don't want to be tied to somebody. But
Let me ask you.
as I said,
Sorry.
Dilip and I celebrated our 50th wedding anniversary in May, and I got a present from him. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the way life should be.
Yeah. I hear you. I'm just sort of inspired to ask you this, though it has nothing to do with, sort of the piece of memory you just shared. But we have these conversations in a very alive manner on She the People, where women often say they hide themselves. They sometimes do less makeup. They don't share what they're earning because they fear that the man will get insecure. Do you think that that was an experience that
But
was very alive
look,
with
it's up to you to break through those barriers. It's up to you to confront those problems with the mother, father, family. In some cases, mothers allow you, and the mothers will tell you to behave differently when the father is about to come home or whatever. But so it's evolving. Society is evolving. It's you. Education. This is what I keep coming back to so many times. Education makes a lot of difference, and also earning. Today, because the women are earning their own money, they're able to say, "No, I will buy that trouser or that shirt," or which before they were never able to do. So,
Yeah.
economic independence has given women independence of a different kind also.
Yeah. Let's go back to college years. You spent college in Miranda House, Delhi?
Um, well, I was all over the place because my father was in the Air Force. So I was in
Yeah.
college in Loreto Convent, Lucknow. Then I was in Christchurch College, Kanpur, and
Then.
eventually Miranda House, Delhi.
Yeah. So how did what was shaping up your thinking as an independent woman or a feminist around that time? What was going on around you uh, to push you to the arts and becoming somebody who has a voice of her own and would like to express it too?
Look, as I said, I never did anything deliberately. It's just that I was interested. And
Yeah.
I've never had to, as I said, audition for anything. It all came to me. But, when the school was casting a play, they asked me, invited me to be. I mean, where in school do you have any independence to say what you want to do? It all comes to you. And so I never had a problem with any of that. When I came to Miranda House, again, the same thing. They were doing their annual play, and I was invited to be a part of it and approved. So it's nothing has been a struggle, and that is what I want women to know, that if you make up your mind that you're going to do something, uh, and let yourself be open to people to let them know that you're interested, opportunities will come your way. You don't have to uh, go standing bowl in hand saying, "I want to act in this play," or "I want to act in this film." I've done everything. I've done theater, I've done film, I've done OTT films also, I've done web series, but I've never had to ask. It's all come. All right, you can say now because my reputation is quite big and a few people know me, so therefore. But that's how you build your career. That's how you
Would
rise
you
from
say
one thing to the
is
other.
there see I see that you celebrate your struggles as nothing, but we've seen that you have sort of been there and stuck it out with whatever opportunities came. What has been your lesson about the opportunities when they come to you? Because
I
today,
grab it. I grab every opportunity.
yeah,
I've
say it
learned
again
on
and,
the
and tell
job.
us how. Yeah.
I've learned on the job. Now, let me tell you when I went to, I learned my Hindi in London. When I went to when I went to London, I worked for the BBC, and suddenly I got a call 2 months into London or 3 months into London to say, would I report to the Central Office of Information because they had some work. When I got there, they gave me 8 scripts in English, and they said I had to translate them and then speak them. I turned to them and I said, "My Hindi is पानी लाओ, जूती पहनाओ, बिस्तरा बनाओ, खाना पकाओ. Where am I going to do this? They said, no, you have. We rang BIS Delhi, and they said that they had me sitting in London and that I would be able to do it. It used to take me 18 hours a day to translate an 8-minute script from Hindi, from English to Hindi. And
But you did it.
I got the Bhargav dictionary, Hindi to English and English to Hindi. I still have them on my shelf, and that's how I learned my Hindi. And when that's a story that some people may be interested in. I it well, Farooq Dhondi. I don't know how many of you would recognize that name, but Farooq Dhondi and I have known each other since we were 11 years old. His father was also in the army, and we were in Kanpur together. And we've been friends, and he was in Cambridge. So my first weekend in London, I went to Cambridge to spend with the people there, and I met people like Darrell de Monte, Adil Jassawala. That was my group of people that I've been brought up with or spent my earlier years in with. And so I rang, they were spending Christmas with me. I run an open house. Wherever I am, I've had an open house. So when I was in London, my roommates had all gone off to their respective homes to celebrate Christmas with their families. And Farooq Dhondi, with a whole lot of his friends, which included Darrell de Monte and people, they came to my place. And when I got when I got this request to translate scripts from English to Hindi, I said, I don't know what to do. He said, Dora, bring it, we'll do it together. So he and I used to sit and work 18 hours a day trying to work out these scripts. In the end, of course, I could do it in 45 minutes. But those first, because I did it for 4 years, but then but he helped me in the first few scripts. Now, on the
Yeah.
first day, when I went to record at the Lambeth North Central Office of Information, I sat in front of the mic, and I said, and he said, it was called London Newsletter, read by, and I gave my name, and which was Dolly Rawson. And the recorder quickly put on the switch and said, uh, could you Indianize your name? That sounds very British. And because this is a London newsletter, they will think that, we've got one Britisher to do it. That within 30 seconds, I had to think of a different name. So now, immediately, my mind went to a friend of mine in school called Kavita Rohatgi, who was a very attractive girl, a very clever girl. I was in awe of girls who did science. I was an art student. I've never done science, and she was a science student. Same year, we were 13, 14 years old. And so I immediately said Kavita, and I couldn't use the Rohatgi because I know it belonged to somebody else. But I added Mehta, because in those days the Patels and Mehtas were slowly taking over England. A whole lot of them had come there. So I said Kavita Mehta, which was a nondescript name. And so I broadcast from London for almost 4 years as Kavita Mehta. But an interesting story to that is when I returned to India, this is 2 years down the line, after I'd returned to India, I was with All India Radio. I was doing a few broadcasts for All India Radio, and I knocked on the station director's door, and I went in, and in those days, the I don't know whether they still have them, but their tables of the station director used to be the size of my room. And sitting opposite him was a gentleman. So I opened the door and I said to him, Arun bhai, wo uska kya karna hai, or something like that. The man sitting opposite him said, ये तो कविता मेहता की आवाज है. And I immediately jumped into the room and said, हाँ मगर आपको कैसे पता? He was the station director of Radio Mauritius. And he had heard my broadcasts for all those years that I was doing those from London. So,
How lovely.
These are lovely stories to dine on at that time, but that's what builds your confidence and gets you to do things.
As I navigate the rest of your book, I can almost hear you say those stories, having had this discussion. Dolly Thakore, it's always a pleasure to have you with us here at She the People. Regrets, some or none, I don't know, but stories, millions of them. That's Dolly Thakore for you. Go out there and get yourself a copy of her brand new book. And thank you very much for joining us at the Women Writers Festival. Thanks.
Girls, I say, write on. Don't let anything deter you. The
Thank
world
you.
is there for you to take.